everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's New, or welcome back. It is your sixth The Crowded Room episode review. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe out there in the large world that is now. This was probably the best episode of The Crowded Room. I'm very happy that, there is an upward trajectory for the show. I feel like taking the creative liberty of not being I feel like that was my one issue with the first three episodes, because they all felt too similar to each other, and so far every installment since episode 3 has felt so independent, but it still is feeding into the larger narrative as we have interesting approaches to build out the primary story, as well as delving into the other characters that isn't just Danny. And honestly, I was a bit shocked about and it was honestly it was the most it's so creative. I will admit that when you take the most simplest of story devices, but you put a different spin to it. So you're now going into this episode with the perspective being, we're not even focusing on Danny right now. We're focusing on Raya, because honestly, Raya has been mostly the foil for us. She's the viewer's perspective. She's asking the questions. We need to go. She's kind of the unofficial narrator in a sense, but we only got little tidbits about herself, and now it's similar to last week, where Danny's childhood story kind of fills in the gaps of how did Danny eventually, not fully, but get to the point where he is when we see him as a 16-year-old. This kind of explains how does Raya enter the picture, what is her life story, what is her values, what is something that she is trying to figure out for her own self, and then that kind of gets into the primary story here, and and again, going back to what I was saying, it takes something that I completely forgot that was an idea, and then they bring it back up and it completely rechanges the way you think of the last 5 episodes. And yeah, some people will say, oh no, that's really simple and basic. I'm yeah, but it's something it subverts my expectations, because I'm expecting something a little bit more eloquent, something that it's never been done before, but it keeps you so focused on complicated stuff that by the time it comes back with something, no, it's something simple, yeah, maybe you can criticize it for being simple, but at the same time it's oh, now I rethink of these the episodes previously that we've seen so far as a different perspective, because now you get to look at it at a different lens of the first 5 episodes were basically just Danny kind of making himself feel like the character at focus here, the hero, or however you want to phrase it, but he's able to take liberties of adjusting things, because again, Danny's telling these stories, but he's not fully being transparent on what the actual thing is. But so I commend them still for I think this is the best episode so far of the show. And again, we only have 4 episodes left, so I'm really hoping we just continue. My only little gripe is that we're still approaching that point of there's still so many mystery pieces left on the table, and that the last episode, the more episodes we spent on the characters, that's great, but at the same time, if we're not really tackling the primary mystery, because there's still a lot of big open-ended questions, and again, 4 hours of television is still enough time to really wrap it up, but I don't know, I'm starting to get a tad bit worried. But let's go for the butcher recap and talk about this week's episode of The Crowded Room. So we begin, I want to say, 1 week after the Rockefeller incident. So obviously by that time, Danny went to London and everything, and eventually he got arrested. So I'm assuming this is a day or so after his arrest, I'm presuming. But we don't start out there. We start off with Raya. She's at home. She has a son, apparently. And, she's just doing the working mom attitude of she's morally focused on work. She just recently separated and recently divorced from her ex-husband. Now she's kind of doing the solo mom thing, but she's primarily focusing on her work. And she's really trying to be a good mom. And thankfully her grandma, her mom, his grandma, is pitching in a lot, trying to cover for her when she's not around. And her son is acting out, because again, being a child divorce, it can depend on what stage you're in. I talked about this before, with me, in my case, I wasn't rebellious, but I was very much carefree and just did whatever the hell I want, because I took advantage of having 2 separated parents. And then in my sister's case, she just I think it just mentally kind of stopped there for a while because she didn't have like a stable environment to call home anymore. Like she always had a home, but like it wasn't like, you know, what she grew up with. But with his case, like he's just having outbursts. He's just not happy the fact that, you know, his mom and dad were together and now they're not together anymore. So I could definitely relate to him about that. So yeah, so after that point we see Raya heading off to work, you know, the heading off to, I want to say it's Columbia. It kind of looks like Columbia to me. There's not that many other universities in New York City primarily to like focus. It's either Columbia or NYU, and I think it's Columbia. She meets up with one of her fellow peers, aka the dean of her campus. He's letting her know that her recently applied grant proposal is going to be sidelined because another person in her field has you know, applied for a grant of his own, and because he has seniority and everything, the university is going to bank him. So she can still continue with her grant proposal, but she cannot get the funding from the university itself, and she kind of gets pissed off about that because, you know, she's, you know, new, and like, you know, she's trying to make this work, but like, you know, it's just like, again, it's not going her way. She's teaching her morning class. It's a really big classroom. I never had a classroom this big, nor do I think everyone here is like specifically for this major. It's probably just one of those required classes, so to speak. And she's talking about dissociated disorders of, you know, like when your identity just kind of like, you know, it turns off. I think that's how it works. I didn't really pay attention with the scene that much, because eventually the detective that we saw back in the first episode pops in. So she ends the class a little bit early. They talk, and, you know, apparently they had a romantic fling / more like a sexual fling after her divorce, but she turned it off because she didn't want to do anything serious at that moment. And he's like, I'm not here for that mostly. I'm just here because, like, I got this case. I got this kid. Obviously, it's Danny. He came in a couple days ago. He's a little bit of an oddball. I'm wondering if you can come in, like, give a professional opinion on him. She agrees because, like, she just, like, ironically, he's also aware of, like, of what she's trying to do with her professional life, with her, like, you know, opinions and, like, not opinions, her potential theses and everything. This would be probably a good candidate for her studies. So he's trying to like throw her a bone, I guess. So they head off to I think the next day they head off to the precinct. That's kind of like we're slowly kind of like, you know, inserting ourselves into, like, you know, where we like this episode again is filling in the scenes for like that we didn't get to see in the first 5 episodes with Rye. Yeah, so eventually we get their first meeting together in the room, and, you know, it's not really like a very, you know, I can believe how, like, I'm morally focused. I was morally fascinated with the second half of the episode. I forgot a little bit about the first half. I want to say they get off the wrong foot. Definitely Rye just proposes the same thing, like, yeah, there really isn't much we can do here. There really isn't. Like, it just seems like this guy's like high on drugs or something, so it would be better for them to like just weed him off for a little bit, just, you know, get him back into like sobriety level, and then like we'll come back and revisit him in a few days from now. So she dips. We get more problems back at her house where, again, the son just does not want to be around her. He's not considering her as an authority figure. The grandma let him talk to his dad because they haven't really had much communications after the divorce. Rye doesn't like that. She just wants to be a stable single parent and just, you know, fully dependent and not have to rely on him whatsoever. They do grab lunch the next day to talk about him, and, you know, just like to remind him, hey, look, I'm trying to do the solo thing. As much as I'm not a perfect mom, you are definitely not a perfect dad as well. And you calling him is just it's not what he needs right now. He definitely just needs to understand this is how his environment is. This is how his life's going to be. And as rude as it is, like, yeah, I mean, again, we don't know much about the dad. It's just like, it's traditional. Like, we just split up, and, like, you know, you got your things, I got my things. But, like, you know, and the matter may be, the moms always get the children somehow. So yeah, so they kind of leave it off as they like just to leave it alone. I want to say she does get curious about Danny a little bit more so she decides to take a free day out of her week to go out and drive out to. I'm guessing they're finally confirming this is in Jersey, or at least in upstate New York. I want to say it's Jersey, just by the way like the map is. So she drives out there. She heads over to the house. And then that's kind of where we're just like getting more of the same clips we got back in episode 2, where like she goes in, she finds the Danny's journal, his drawing book, and she's about to leave. But we don't get to see after that is the next scene afterwards, where she's putting the journal in her car and she's about to leave, but then Danny's mom shows up, asking like, why are you in the house? Do you know Danny? What's going on? I haven't seen him in a couple of weeks. Well, what the heck is going on here? And that's where Rye fills in the story for her, like that he got arrested due to the Rockefeller incident, and that right now he's being held in jail pending official charges. So it's obviously she's not his official psychiatrist yet, but she's like, considering, actually helping him, and like, him talking to her would be like beneficial. This is where she learns about Alex for the first time, about like, how her life wasn't perfect, and that kind of affected Danny a little bit, especially after Alex was, was murdered, and then after, just like his relationship with his stepdad. Just one thing after another, like it just has not been kind for Danny. And again, this kind of like set the basis for like, how Rye wants to go about like, her eventual game plan to like eventually get the truth out of things. I know after this meeting, during this meeting, she asked the most difficult question of like, was Danny ever raped as a child? And she never gives a direct answer. She's just like, I gotta go to work. So like, she knows something, but she doesn't want to admit it, especially that this is not officially like on the books yet. So, there's not much she can do. So yeah, after that, we get back to New York, and I want to say, actually not yet, not quite yet. So eventually she goes back to the police station. She wants to see Danny one more time. He's already been sentenced to Riker. He's about to move out in the next couple of hours. But Rise is like, just one little visit, just one, just to confirm something about this. So she does do so, and she talks to him, but he's speaking in a British accent for some reason. That was like the one thing that's like, a little bit questionable. He's a little bit more brash. And like that was a weird thing about this first half, because like I was so like, the Danny we knew was more timid, he was more shy, more reserved, and then when we see Danny in the perspective of like, when we were seeing Rye kind of like figuring him out for the first time, he's more brash, he's more vocal, he's more open, he's more like, sassy, kind of like, just like, provocative. And it's like, that's not the Danny we know. And then he's speaking in this British accent at the same time. And she just needed that one meeting, and then eventually watching TV to kind of like really connect everything together, where she pitches to her dean of like officially like, doing a study, basing her thesis on Danny, and like this could like basically like really revolutionize, the terminology for the field. And this could definitely be the thing she needs. He's a little bit apprehensive about this, because like, it's a very unique, a very low key, not low key. It's a very, very unknown area. It's a very niche topic that like, it's very small. It's very like unique, that like it would take a lot of work to prove all this that she wants to do. But if she does get this proven and like, accredited, that this will be a big thing for her. She can get tenure. She can have a guaranteed, future for her son. It definitely is like, it's definitely the break she needs. So, that was the plan. And then also she has dinner with the cop again, and like she lets him know about the journal and everything, and then like, that's when she pitches her theory to him that maybe Danny has multiple personalities, that he probably has a second personality that probably was the one who did the Rockefeller shooting, but that wasn't Danny. It wasn't. And I'm just like, okay, this sounds great because you're going to help Danny, but at the same time, in a court of law, like, again, at the time period, probably, it's going to be super difficult to prove to a court of law that Danny didn't kill him, but this other person did it. This British personality did it. It's just so hard to convince, because, like, it's just very, like, I mean, nowadays, a lot of people plead, like, being mentally, unsound just to, like, get out of things. So I'm like, yeah, it's even back then, I couldn't even imagine it wasn't even fully accepted yet. So it's much more difficult to convince in a court of law. But he's apprehensive, but they are going to a good direction. At least the plan is right now for her is to eventually gain Danny's trust, figure out what's going on with him, and then eventually get what he needs to know to, like, fully identify him as someone with multiple personalities. So she meets up with his lawyer, i.e. the court-appointed lawyer. He doesn't really give a shit, because again, it's a court-appointed, like, it's not something he's really getting paid for a lot to do. Eventually she convinces him, like, kind of like, guilts him a little bit, and he's like, okay, fine, here's his case, get the Xerox of the files you need, I'll get you approval, but I'm only giving you 1 month. He has 1 month to you got 1 month to, like, basically get this kid to confess to everything. So that's her mission, that's her plan. So eventually we get to the first their first proper session. This is where the British personality is fully taken over. So So I find it quite interesting because, again, the first 5 episodes were mainly setting on Danny. Like, Danny's telling the story for his perspective. So when we meet the character back in what was I gonna say? Yeah, back in London. Supposedly his dad's acquaintance. There's just like so many things that, like, okay, some things in those things, like, are probably going to be like, well, does that really make sense if that was just a figment of Danny's imagination, or what that really was, Danny? And like, the more you think about it, like, yeah, it does make sense to like especially in episode 4, where like when he goes back to London and like everyone is like, after he briefly supposedly loses touch with him. I forgot the guy's name, the British, not Lucius Malfoy. When he briefly separates from him, and he's asking everyone for like, do you remember him? Do you see him? And like everyone's just like being so cold to him, like being like, oh, I don't know who you're talking about. Like, get the fuck away from me. And like, it was like, I was like a little confused because like I didn't know the context, but now going back to this with that, no, so that character was actually just the personification of what Danny's alternate personality is. And like, that was like one of the first instances where like it actually showed itself to Danny, but it couldn't really like scare him because like he was going to be scared, like, I have another me in me. So it just took the form supposedly of a physical being, which like kind of doesn't make sense because, like, you know, financially, like, how did Danny able to do a lot of the things? So that didn't really make sense in my opinion. So but yeah, so they talk, and like their first meeting does not do anything really. You know, he's just confirming like, yeah, I am a personality. Like, you know, I am not Danny's inside the body. I'm letting him sleep. I am the primary personality right now, and I don't think right now it's in the best interest to let, you know, Danny know about this. So I'm gonna take these free clothes. These are voluntary, so I could just easily say no the next time you come over. So I'll be seeing you. So he dips, but of course, you know, Rai still takes that as a victory, confirming that yes, there is another personality in Danny. Now the primary task is to get Danny out. Is to, like, you know, talk to Danny directly, because this guy is the defensive personality. He's trying to protect Danny from like the hard questions. So I want to say, like, eventually we have more scenes with the mom, and like, you know, that they're just not, you know, it's like slowly like being apparent that Rai is like really balancing too many things and not focusing enough things on her son. So that's definitely back in play here. I know back when we get to the second session with them, like the proper second session, and again, he's still like keeping up with the personality, like just not budging a little bit. Eventually Rai does like tell him, like, you know, that, look, Danny's in a really big problem right now, and I need to talk to him, and, you know, like, this is what needs to happen. Otherwise, you know, that he could like be behind these bars for like the rest of his life. And the personality agrees. Not Lucius Malfoy's agamation, like, does, you know, agrees, like, okay, fine, you can talk to Danny, but gotta be gentle with him. Do not tell him I'm here. You gotta find a way to like convince this kid, like, you know, that everything's fine. That's what you gotta do. So just don't tell him about me. So she agrees, and this is like honestly a well acted scene where like we see Tom Holland, like, you know, kind of like it's a facial expression scene where you see his eyes, like, you know, the other personality is leaving, Danny's coming back, and he's just slowly realizing, where the fuck am I? Like, how long has he been out? I don't really know, but you can imagine how scared he is internally of like, why am I in jail? What the hell happened? Like, there's just obviously, like, even like, I'm pretty sure Bryce doesn't even know how the chain of events work, but like, no, he's here now. He's stuck in this house, not this house. He's stuck in this jail, this prison, and yeah. So right now it's playing the waiting game, like getting to trust him, and then that's when we get the inserts from like the previous 5 episodes when Danny's filling in on his story to her and everything. So we're just kind of like, you know, once again getting that, like, you know, we're cycling back where we're getting to that point of like everything's like starting to connect again. And then comes a new scene where she talks to Danny again, and she, you know, she doesn't ask about Alex this time. She just asked about, like, you know, what happened, you know, with Alex, you know. I mean, yeah, she does ask, but like she's saying it in a new way of like, what happened with Alex, you know, like, and at first Danny's like, I don't want to talk about it, and then she eventually like asks of him, I'm like, okay, you don't have to. You can take your time. And then eventually Danny likes like, okay, I'll begin. Where it's kind of like, you know, beginning, like ending where we left off in the last episode, where he's telling the story about how he got picked up in school, that the stepdad had a barn, and then, you know, that Alex was in the back, and then they went to the barn for the first time. That's where we got the scene in the last episode, and he's explaining what happened in the barn. And as a viewer or we don't, or a listener, we don't get to hear what he's saying, but we get a scene with Raya playing, and they're using the Beatles song, and I'm just like, oh, not Beatles, a John Lennon song, and I was like, damn. I'm singing along to this song, and this is supposed to be a depressing ass scene. So I'm like, this is kind of like being contradicted, like specifically to me, where it's implied that like either Alex and or probably still Danny got raped by him, and again, it's not confirmed. Like I don't believe that's the assumption that he did, but like again, for me, like I don't believe anything till like it's physically spoken of, like it's on the record, and I guessing it's like a difficult thing, and like I definitely do. Understand like Rai feeling so emotional about this because Rai has a child, she has a son, and like not only is she like trying to think of like the pain that Danny went through, like obviously like you create a personality when like you went through something so stressful, so traumatic as a child, that your only way to respond is to basically create this imaginary personality, forget all your pain, never really tackle it, and move on. And that's kind of what happened in Danny's case, but it was never really expressed. Like, no one ever really knew. Like, again, like, it would be interesting if someone was to do a rewatch after this episode. I wouldn't do it because, like, right now, like, I don't want to go back. But it would be interesting to go back and see those 5 episodes with the perspective of there's another personality in Danny. How would that change how you view certain things of the show? Would be interesting, but right now I don't feel inclined to do so. But Rai's crying. She heads back home. She hugs her mom. She hugs her child. Just like admitting personally that something messed up happened today, and now more than ever, she just needs to find a way to get him help to like make sure he doesn't spend his life behind a cell. But again, there's still a lot of questions and a lot of answers that we need solving. Yeah, a few other things that I forgot to mention during the recap because again, I'm all over the place here. The detective does come back to Rai. She gives her a tape. No, he gives her a tape to say, watch it and then call me and let's talk about it. We don't get to see what's on the tape. It's presumably about Adriana, but like, again, we don't know 100%. We really don't know. But yeah, no, that I think that mainly covers the point of it. That was it for this week's episode of The Crowded Room. For me, again, like I think this is the best one, mainly because like again, doing another switch perspective, getting something a little bit fresh, continuing the story in a new matter of telling it was very nice to see. It was very interesting. I definitely have to give kudos again to Amanda Seinfeld and Tom Holland for doing all this. And the thing that that I find to be the most the most takeaway is that that they were able to like again taking something simplistic of like multiple personality disorder, which I'm like I've seen that a good amount of times on TV. I've seen it all over the place, but to see it in this context where like it wasn't apparent from the get-go. This was something that was subvert and like if you really paid attention, if you really squinted deeply, you could have noticed it. But for me being like such an average schmo that I don't pay attention to a lot of things sometimes, and I'm just letting the story, like the basic story, kind of like follow me through, and then like being naturally surprised. I was naturally surprised, like at the end of the day, of like what they were trying to do and what they were trying to pitch, and I think it paid off mostly. I think there's going to be some inconsistencies when you do go back and like view it from a different perspective. I don't think it's a perfect thing, but I will give them credit, like just seeing the story so far in Ray's perspective does definitely help things, be more understandable to the viewers. It definitely gives a much more better clarity picture. And again, it still like opens, like it makes sense why at the Rockefeller incident where like it's probably not Lucius Malfoy at the helm, and then once the stepdad turns around, that's when Danny like gets shocked back into reality. He's like, that's when he's so baffled and confused. And I don't even think Adriana knew. I don't think anyone else really knew that he had an alternate personality because it wasn't apparent. But at the end of the day, I still think this was a really great episode. I definitely, love the balance. I definitely, Tom delivered this episode again, and Amanda did as well. And I feel like, again, this is going to go down as like the best episode so far. And I'm hopeful the trend continues upwards as we've been in the last few episodes. So hopefully we're getting to like that point of like, okay, now we're going to start like tying it deeper, tying in like, how does everything fit into place? And that's what I can't wait for. But for now, I'm going to give this episode 2 thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this week's episode of The Crowded Room. Let's have a conversation down below. But I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from ActionX, reviewing every episode of The Crowded Room. If you want to know what we're doing normally, What's the Two besides our Crowded Room episode reviews. Right now, we're doing Nancy Drew reviews each and every week after brand new is on the CW. But if you don't care about The Crowded Room, you're in luck. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode review, so stay tuned until then. But until next time, stay safe out there. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Like, favorite, share if you want to. Ring the bell and follow us on social media. But until that point, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. And as always, peace out.